Hi. Every conflict has a story underneath it. Welcome to the Clarity Connection. I'm Connie, and today we are going to uncover one more piece of that story. Most communication advice focuses on what to say. They talk about using I language or use the word feel. I feel this. But I think difficult conversations usually go wrong long before anyone opens their mouth. And that's because we tend to mix four things together. Actually, four different categories. Each of them gets tangled up a little bit. And that is what happened, how we felt, why that mattered, and what we'd like to have happen next. When those get tangled up together, we usually react. And the other person that we're talking to usually gets defensive instead of communicating. So today I want to introduce a new way of thinking that can help separate those topics. Okay, here's the big picture. When something happens, we'll call it an incident, that bothered you either a lot or a little, but it's something that has you upset. There's four kind of things that happen or that need to happen that we need to untangle. One is your observation. Two is your feeling. Three is your need. And four is a request. So observation, feeling, need, request. Okay, throughout this channel, we are going to be unpacking each of these areas in depth. Today, I just kind of want to introduce them and understand the difference between these four ideas can really change a lot of difficult conversations that you're having or you ever will have. Okay, first of all, observation. The thing that gets tangled up with is interpretation, because it's really hard for us to just give the facts. Remember Joe Friday, long time ago? Just the facts, ma'am, because we get carried away in a story, all right? So we need to not get carried away in our story or our conclusions or interpretations. Here's some examples. Here's the interpretation. Okay, he ignored me. Is that actually what happened, or is that your interpretation of what happened? It's an interpretation. What actually happened, and let's think of just the facts. This would be something that, like, if you could film it on a video or take a picture of it, what would that show? Well, it would show that I said good morning and he walked past without responding. That's the facts of what happened. My interpretation is he was ignoring me. Okay, here's another example. She is so rude. Well, that's an interpretation. What happened, when I was talking earlier, she interrupted me 3 times. That's the facts. Do you see the difference between what we kind of think their intention is? We're kind of coming to some conclusion. And here's the thing. When we come to conclusions like that, we always make ourselves out to be the victim and the other person to be the bad guy. He ignored me. She was so rude. Here's one. My boss made fun of me. Or no, my boss doesn't trust me. Well, what really happened? Maybe he just asked you to revise that report that you made. Give it a second check through before you send it. So you're really making an interpretation of whether he trusts you or not. Things like that, okay? So notice the observations, they don't tell us why someone did something. All they tell us is what they said, what they did. And it's important because a lot of different explanations can fit that same observation. So we're not even going into those interpretations yet. We've just got to figure out how to observe without doing the interpretation first. Okay, the next thing is your feelings. When something happens, we usually have feelings about that. Okay, there's 2 different kinds of feelings. One is I call it somatic feelings, the feelings that are actually in your body, like my chest gets tight, my shoulders get tight, I feel a knot in my throat, I get tension in my head. Those are physical feelings. And then there's the emotional feelings. So both of those are perfectly valid. And our feelings are really just like little flags telling us, hey, something's not going on here that needs to pay attention to this. So, but here's a common mistake. We mix up our thoughts with our feelings. Notice how in the last one it was our thoughts, it was our interpretations and conclusions. Well, in here it's the same thing, it's our thoughts, and that can be judgments, diagnosis, interpretations, conclusions. All those things get tangled up with our feelings. And if you're like me, I used to think, I think I know the difference between my thoughts and my feelings. Turns out it's a little messier because we're just used to tangling those up. Okay, here's a common mistake. I feel, so does that mean it's going to be a feeling? I feel attacked. I feel ignored. I feel threatened. I feel manipulated. None of those are feelings. They're kind of sideways, backdoor ways of blaming someone else. Because the only way, what ignored mean is that you ignored me. You're attacking me. You're threatening me. Try it. Try saying those. Yeah, well, I feel really attacked. The other person that you're talking to is going to get defensive. Okay, those aren't feelings. Those aren't your feelings. Those are more like a way of interpreting what their intentions are. But if you say, well, I feel, we think we can get away with it. And it just doesn't lead to a conclusion or clear communication. What our feelings would be the ones I explained, tightness or pressure or tension, or pain of some kind. Or I feel hurt. I feel disappointed. I feel anxious. I feel embarrassed. I feel lonely. There's lots of different kinds of emotions. Those are emotions. So if we get that tangled up, the other person is much more likely to argue with us because they're going to feel blamed. And they kind of are if we take that route. Okay, the next step is needs. The thing that we mix up needs with is the strategies. Needs, strategies. The need is kind of an underground need. For example, okay, I need reliability. Now, that might come across if we've concluded, all right, there's one way to get this met, and I'm going to tell them what this is. You need to text me every hour because I have a need for reliability. Well, there's a lot more strategies than that. That might be great. If the other person agrees to it, that might work out great. Let's take something easy, like hunger. I feel hunger. What do you feel when you're hungry? Well, I feel irritable. I feel kind of a grumbling in my stomach. So we're hungry. We do need food. There's a lot of different strategies for that, though. We can make ourselves something at home. If we're out, we can stop and get something out. There's a lot of different restaurants we can go to, different price points. They all create a different mood and environment, different types of food. So we've got a lot of options or strategies to get that need met. Okay, for example, I remember something my dad said to me. I think it was either a homecoming dance or a junior prom. It's been a minute. But I was going out with a group. There was probably 6 couples all going together. And the guys decided to take us all to a pretty pricey restaurant. And my dad, when he found out, they're taking you where? He's like, let me turn off the AC so it's not noisy. That's so expensive. And you know, you can go in there or you can go into McDonald's. And either way, you come out full. So he's not wrong. However, there were a lot more memories and the ambiance there and the mood. So there were other reasons to go there. But that's true. Those were just different strategies of meeting the hunger need, right? If you have a need for respect, that can be met a lot of different ways. You have a need for connection, that can be met a lot of different ways. So we have to separate out. Sometimes when we decide what the strategy is, we're going to fight on that. But that's not what the real issue is. It's the need. And can the need be met another way? So I'm telling you, there's usually lots of legitimate strategies. Okay, the last one is requests. Okay, sounds simple enough. When we make a request, here's what happened. This is what happened. Observation. He said this, I did this. I felt, what did I feel? I felt lonely. I felt upset. I felt just disconnected. I felt resentful. I felt whatever. I have a need. I have a need for connection. I have a need for understanding. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? I've thought about some strategies, and you don't have to always brainstorm together the strategies. That is a way to do it. We'll talk about that later, but you can think of several different strategies and then make a request for one of them. Don't expect people to read your mind. That's like emotional maturity kindergarten level. Well, if he loved me, he'd just know what I need. No, we make requests. We ask for things, and that is so much more helpful because we know what we need. We know the feelings, the need, and what would help. So the problem is that gets tangled up in demands. Request, demand. I'll tell you the main difference, and it's not how you word it. Here's what a demand could sound like. Hey, you know what? I have a need for connection. Would you be willing to just spend a little time, like maybe tonight, could we see a movie together, please? That could be a demand. It doesn't matter how nice or how thoughtful you say it. Here's the difference between a request and a demand. It's what happens if the answer is no. And it's not what happens right away. It could happen right away. Someone could get mad and upset. So you're not even going to whatever, and it just leads the fight. So it really wasn't a request. A request gives the other person autonomy. It makes room for either a yes or a no. Either one is an answer to a request. I made a request of my husband. I was struggling with something, and I asked for something, and he was upset as well. So he said no. I was like, oh. And it's okay. We can be, but I had to think, okay, so that was a no. He's an adult. He can say no to a request. I had to re-strategize. Think of some different ways to get that need met and ask for something else. So it happens. It can be a no, but it has to be able to be a no without a big fight. Or down the road, they're going to get even. Next time you ask for something, they're going to say no. That's a demand. When there's punishment attached to the no. A no has to be completely free, or it's a demand. Okay, so you make a request. A good way to word the request is to say, hey, would you be willing to, and then you ask for the strategy that you thought of. Anyway, okay, just to wrap this all up, we noticed what happened. Notice what happened today. We just noticed what happened. Just the facts, ma'am. We did that observation. We didn't solve anything. We didn't talk about who's right. We didn't figure out exactly what to say. We just talked about those 4 things that can get tangled up together. And that is observation getting tangled up with interpretation. Feelings getting tangled up with thoughts. Needs getting tangled up with strategies. And requests getting tangled up with demands. That's all. Once we learn how to separate those, our communication and our conversations get so much easier. All right, I have a challenge for you. Here's the curiosity challenge. During this next week, well, if it's not this week, sometime when something upsets you, I want you to write those 4 things down. What did you observe? Just the facts. What did you feel? What do you need? And what are some possible requests that you could make? Just write that down. You don't have to say it. You don't have to do anything with that. But let's see if you can just separate those out and write them down. And let me know which one ended up being the hardest of those 4. Okay, next time we're going to dive a lot deeper into the first step, observations. I know it sounds simple, but it can be challenging, untangling all that. But remember, understanding begins with curiosity. So, until next time, stay curious.